You sure?
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. Those two voices you just heard, other than mine, are our two guest hosts for today's episode. Phil, well, I'm Connor Rebush, you already know that. Phil McKenzie is once again failing me by, this time instead of having other things to worry about, his own health. The man got COVID. He's lying on his deathbed even as we speak. And so I have been forced to replace him once again, hopefully on a temporary basis. Last time I went with, my logic was, who's another English guy I know? And brought in Kyle McLaughlin. This time I went with, who's another sarcastic dickhead I know? And brought in Zane Simon and his beloved dog, Molly. Zane, how are you?
Well, with an intro like that, how else can I be? But
you weren't going to be any other way.
How can I feel other than incredibly blessed and humbled by the understanding that the biggest reason that you brought me on the show today is that I can replicate something like Phil's absolute disdain for your existence on this planet.
I just thought, who else is as mean to me as Phil? I can't have my girlfriend on. So, because she doesn't know anything about MMA.
That and sure, the way she shames you would probably lead to a really weird episode of you just repeatedly getting turned on.
So I'll have my abusive work girlfriend, Zane. Welcome to the show. Very happy.
I'm your work wife at this point.
That's right. Very happy to have you. Do I get tax benefits? That's what I want to know.
Well, I've been claiming you as a dependent for years.
So, on this week's episode, we're going to be looking back at UFC 271. I'm pretty excited, actually, because Zane, you and I, we're going to be talking tomorrow about a terrible card that we have no reason to bring up here. But it's rare that you and I get to talk about fights in hindsight, ever.
Yeah, no, we're usually, the UFC schedule kind of demands that we move on to the next one. And then when we do talk about old fights, we talk about the worst ones we can find.
And, that's the kind of analysis I enjoy most. Like, I'm famously bad at picking fights. But talking about them in review, like, I've learned things and I really enjoy sort of connecting the dots and figuring out why what happened. And, on this card, we differed on 4 picks, which I miscounted on Twitter on Saturday as 5.
That's all right. We know. I mean, you and picks and math.
I also got ruthlessly mocked for that by Mookie, which is why he was choice number 2 if you weren't able to do it. And we went 2-2.
Yeah.
So I think I have to keep calling you His Eminence, Your Eminence, but I was close to breaking free.
You were really close, and I'm going to make sure that never happens again. I will have you hobbled at this point.
So, the whole main card here, we're really going to try and cover, I think, on this episode. We'll get to at least 4 of the fights, I promise. And then there are a couple undercard fights that we may be able to squeeze into a quick bonus episode for you guys. So, that means Israel Adesanya, Robert Whittaker 2, Tai Tuivasa knocking out Derek Lewis in a perfectly silly heavyweight fight.
Yeah, that was exactly what we expected to happen.
Jared Cannonier, Derek Brunson, we kind of got to see both of the 2 true outcomes in that fight, which was interesting.
I was shocked.
Right? We got to see both Brunson having success with his wrestling, and then I really enjoyed when the commentators were like, something's off about Brunson. His breathing is strange. I'm like, he's tired.
Yeah.
He got tired. Moycano Hernandez, really good to see Moycano getting a win like that. Bobby Green, Nasser Haqparast, probably my favorite fight of the card, even though it was the most one-sided. I love seeing Bobby Green's style on somebody, and that 3rd round was one of the best dominant rounds. Like, I put that on par with some of Whittaker's best rounds against Kelvin Gastelum. Just a 10-8 off the back foot, something you almost never see in this sport. So that's everything we're going to try and cover. Let's start off with the main event, Zane. This was one where my heart was in it for Robert Whittaker, but I think wisely picked Israel Adesanya. a lot of people are disappointed in this fight. It wasn't like a war at all.
No.
There are things...
Not even... I mean, maybe a fringe skirmish. Maybe the kind of thing that, like, your ultra-patriotic propaganda press is going to chalk up as a major victory for your boys at home afterward. But really, if you go there, it was, like, we bombed a tent and nobody was in it.
But, very tense. And as far as fights that rely on tension to maintain interest, it was no Thompson-Woodley. It was better than that kind of fight.
No. Oh, yeah. It was definitely better.
So I get why people are maybe frustrated. I think there's room to be frustrated with both guys. Although neither of them in ways that at this point I think anyone should be surprised by.
No.
So given that, I found it pretty damn compelling.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I want to find it compelling. I definitely don't dislike or not understand the fight that both men had going into it, or coming out of it, rather. But I do feel like we saw an instant set for Adesanya that I kind of expected.
An instant, what's that?
A tempo, like just a tone, I should say. An instant tone was set by Adesanya.
Yeah.
And I was not surprised by that. I figured he would actually come out and have a really good start to this fight.
Yeah, Phil advised that, and I think it was, not like a barnstorming start, but he had a very strong first round. He did come out very assured and confident, which I think was the right move.
Yeah, and Robert Whittaker came out thinking that he needed to play a safer fight.
Yeah. And
very quickly finding out that was just a really terrible idea.
Or he couldn't play it as safe as he was intending to.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The thing I would say after that, though, that kind of gets to me not feeling as good about the tension of the fight is I don't really feel like after that adjustments were made. And I don't really feel like adjustments were made all the rest of the way.
Yeah.
They both found a range and a rhythm to the fight that they became, if not comfortable enough with, willing to live in and live with.
Yeah. And
that doesn't, I took some, I got, it's not viral, I got like 500 likes or something for it. Nothing, not something, but I had a hot take afterward where I was saying that fighting a really slow, cautious fight is not fighting smart.
No. It's the critique I've had of Leon Edwards so often. Yeah. Like, you've got a guy shook and uncertain. Why are you giving him so many chances to figure something out? Yeah.
And so this just really felt like it wasn't a smart fight. It wasn't a smart fight from Adesanya, and it wasn't a smart fight from Robert Whittaker. But of course, it's clear for Robert Whittaker because Whittaker lost. Nobody's going to turn around and argue.
And it was certainly
Whittaker had a smart fight.
A better fight for Whittaker. So he gets a little bit of leeway there because he got smoked the first time.
Yeah, he fought a better fight than getting smoked.
Yeah,
but he also walks away with the loss. And the truth is that they both fought almost the exact same fight after the first round, and it was decided on more or less a coin flip.
Yeah, round 2 set the tone. How did you score it live? Because I of course, I had to rescore it. I was very anxious for this fight. I did again. The tension was high. I love Bobby Knuckles, which certainly I'm sure biased my live perception. And I was just too anxious to score things accurately. That's never happened to me before, by the way. I've never had any famous examples of turning in questionable scorecards because I'm super invested and am too nervous, and also other things are going wrong with my computer, and I'm just like freaking out the whole time. So what did you think of it live?
I scored it 4-1 Adesanya.
4-1?
Yep. 4 rounds for Adesanya, 1 round for Whittaker.
Yeah, I don't think that's insane, but I also don't really. To me, I upon review, I feel like round 1, obviously Adesanya's.
Yeah.
Round 5, pretty clear round for Robert Whittaker.
I didn't see that.
I thought, it's a pretty damn close round down to the last minute and a half when Whittaker lands probably the best shot of the fight.
Yeah, maybe.
A big left hook out of a really nice move, actually, like sort of a Fedor-esque transition off the single leg to land the left hook over the top. Really nice tactic. But in review, I thought round 4 was the swing round, which is not to say that the other rounds weren't close. I thought round 2 was Whittaker's, but close. Round 3, actually pretty clearly Adesanya's in review. And then round 4, very close. I couldn't really say confidently who won it.
Round 4 was the one round I gave to Robert Whittaker.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
That was the point where I felt like Adesanya did not land anything compelling.
Yeah.
And where his trade-offs of low kicks to eating jabs in the face really just felt like he got the wrong end of that deal.
Yeah. I look at the stats for this fight, and they kind of befuddle me. I gotta wonder, like, the stats do not seem to depict what actually happens in the fight.
Yeah.
Where Adesanya, I think, outlands Bobby on paper by like 20 shots. And in reality, a lot of those shots are partial connections. There are a lot of sort of half or even mostly checked low kicks. There are a lot of body kicks that just sort of skim the body. Of course, we know Adesanya's a dynamite kicker, and those can still really hurt.
Yeah.
We've seen, like, Edson Barboza finished Evan Dunham with a skimming body kick. It's happened more than once. But a lot of not clean connections. And then just having like 2 or 3 super impactful low kicks against like 4 or 5 quite clean jabs. And it is really up in the air to me how you score that. Several people said after the fact that they just automatically score a low kick as being worth like 3 times as much as even a very clean jab. And I don't get that. Like, you know, I've been kicked in the leg. I've been jabbed in the face. Neither is pleasant.
Yeah. No, I think that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Kicks are harder than jabs, but the leg is a softer target that many people can endure being hit, whereas, you know, getting hit in the face tends to stun you if even for a split second.
Yeah.
Getting hit clean in the fucking nose will definitely make your vision spark for just a moment. I don't know. To me, it's a trade-off. I have to, if neither guy is showing visible effects of damage, then I just go by who landed more clean strikes.
Yeah, that's really all I had.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it was just, you know, I'm watching it, and I saw what the stats more or less bear out, which was Adesanya very barely outlanding Robert Whittaker for strikes in every round except the 4th, which I scored for Whittaker. And that was it. Like, you know, it was a really weird thing to me when round 5 came around and the booth started talking about, like, oh, this is what Robert Whittaker needs to be doing to win this fight. This is him getting the win in. And, you know, it's just like, for what, not being able to wrestle Israel Adesanya?
Essentially, the value of the wrestling in that round is just that it gave Adesanya less time to rack up kicks.
Yeah.
Like, it really just gave it more neutral time, so that in my book, Whittaker landing like 3 clean shots, 1 very clean and hard, is enough for me to give him the round. But I wouldn't score the wrestling positively because it was a wash.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a fight that will, the best thing it does for Adesanya is it keeps him winning.
Yeah.
When you have the belt, honestly, and you know, it's more important than anything else to just walk away with a win, and it won't even probably cost him some like future payday or fans or pay-per-view sales or whatever. But it isn't going to be a fight that anybody really remembers.
No. But it's fine for Adesanya. At a certain point, too, people both love and hate, whatever the case, they pay attention to dominance.
Yeah.
Unless you're Demetrius Johnson, I guess, and the promotion is invested in burying you at all costs. But, yeah, people care about people who are dominant. So this is why people easily forget all of, like, or at least many of Anderson Silva's, like, uninspired wins.
Yeah, he only had a couple, but
few,
yeah.
I agree. And we've also reviewed the Talis latest fight and found it to be pretty goddamn dominant, but...
Yeah. But GSP, he certainly had his fair share of fights where you're just like, man, whatever. You've checked into one gear, it is winning you the fight, and you don't care about anything else beyond that.
Yeah, but you remember the highlights, and you rack up enough wins like that, it's like, all right, I guess the guy's really goddamn good.
Yeah.
Which is the case.
That's the point I think that I want to, to make as part of the part of my hot take that Adesanya didn't fight the smartest fight in the world that I didn't make, that I should, maybe, I don't really care. He's got enough ego for himself, whatever, is that he is really clearly incredibly talented, and that carries him through whatever decision-making process he goes through.
Yeah. Yeah, so, what were the adjustments? What could have gone differently? I think, again, this is not like at this point, a very surprising kind of fight from either guy. We know that Robert Whittaker, we can say very confidently now, even more confidently than before this, he just doesn't like being outranged by people.
Yeah.
He doesn't like when people's main instinct is to withdraw from his entries. I think, as mad as Michael Bisping, of all people, was that he was really just jabbing. I think there was
Dominic Cruz getting mad at somebody for having overactive footwork.
Yeah, right. I think, there was a very clear reason for that. Robert Whittaker tends to, when he has to chase someone, overthrow his right hand.
Yeah.
And that's, even if it leads into a combination, or even if he can catch himself and recover and evade, that is a risk he was not willing to take after what happened in the first fight. The right hand, I think he somewhat correctly identified as the, crux of him winning or losing these exchanges. And one thing that Phil and I talked about was that he could just, double up on the jab instead of treating it as an entry into combinations and then disengage. That's one.
He did that a lot.
He did it a lot, and it worked frequently.
Yeah.
The double jab is a beautiful, simple, safe combination, and at least one of those jabs is going to land most of the time. It's difficult to counter. It's a really good way to get yourself in and then get yourself out with cover. That was one tactic that Phil and I thought would work. I think the other ideas, though, this really felt to me like a fight where Robert Whittaker's focus was on mitigating the downsides of his instinctive style.
Yeah.
Rather than finding ways to build on it that were just safer than before.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we're talking what were the adjustments, how were they made? We saw, starting out, Robert Whittaker, who was his game plan coming out was, I don't want to screw up on this against this guy.
Right.
I'm going to come out and I'm going to counter punch him.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to stay on my back foot. I am going to try not to run into anything. I'm going to let him run into me. Yeah. And he immediately found that giving Adesanya a ton of time and space and initiative and hoping to catch him, is just a terrible idea because Adesanya is too long and he's too fast.
Which is a bit dispiriting that he didn't seem to know that coming in.
Yeah, it is a little.
That he went back to the corner after round one. He was like, his leg kicks are good, or he's figured out how to low kick me. It's like, bro, people do that all the time.
Yeah. Not. It's pro fighting, not pro thinking.
This is Israel Adesanya. Of course he knows how to kick your leg. It's what he does in slow fights.
Yeah. And, so after that, he was incredibly dispirited. And his corner did well to boost him back up, to get him thinking a little, to get him working.
And however you scored it, he rebounded tremendously well in round 2.
Yeah, he rebounded tremendously well in round 2, partially just because the fight, Adesanya tried to pressure forward and kick, and Whittaker started to counter with the jab.
Yeah.
And started working with the jab as both a lead and a counter. Mm-hmm. The fight was very much an ebb and flow of who was pushing forward at any one time.
Sure.
I think we remember a lot of Adesanya pushing forward because he won.
Yeah.
But he spent just as much time in the fight, or maybe close to as much time on the fight on his back foot, with Whittaker pushing forward and meeting him with the jab.
Yeah, I think he had more sustained pressure than Whittaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when he would withdraw, it was kind of for a moment, and then it would go back to a somewhat more neutral, positional kind of fight.
But I think what we ended up with then is, Whittaker got that. He figured that out.
Yeah.
And Adesanya figured out, okay, every time I step in, I'm going to eat jabs.
Yep.
And I want to kick the leg. That's hurting him. And we just stayed there. I mean, Whittaker, he hit some takedowns. He tried takedowns at various points all through the fight. They worked a little bit, but they never built into any other offense. He got a couple nice shots off the break on Adesanya.
Really just the one that I remember, to be honest, in round 5. And it was a great shot. It's the kind of thing where I'm like, man, you should have been doing that more. You should have been using the takedowns to set up clean strikes in the pocket. But
it really would have been nice to see Adesanya start jabbing the body more. He did it some, and it worked every time he did it.
True, yeah.
But it was just, it wasn't the center point of his plan.
Jabbing the body more, or teeps.
Yeah.
Some kind of straight line attack at these long ranges where you can just build on the fact that, actually start picking Whittaker apart rather than just kind of pecking at him.
Yeah, it was a lot of fencing each other. They were both fencing each other off a lot. It's just sort of, and I mean like sword fencing, not range fencing, but just trying to poke in a way that was like, okay, let's keep you out at your distance because I don't want to step inside and risk that exchange.
Yep.
And it's fine, but it's not.
Yeah.
Doesn't come back as a fight that it's not a memorable performance from either man, and it's not smart fighting.
No. Yeah, I agree. Adesanya could have had. It's funny, the commentary was really going on about how much variety there was in Adesanya's striking, but not really.
Not really.
It was like left body kick, occasional left high kick, right low kick.
Yeah.
That was really the bulk of it. That was like 80%. Some straight line kicks. He tried a couple to the head, but just teeped the body. That would have worked really well, I think. Maybe coming in with intent to slip Whittaker's jab and fire something would have been nice. And for Whittaker, again, I think he just sort of ended up in like because I wrote an article last week. That was the idea was like, I've talked about this both on the Vivi and on last week's Heavy Hands too. It's like, here's the question for Robert Whittaker. Do you entirely mitigate and sort of fight against type as a result, where you realize, okay, being aggressive like I was got me in trouble. I can't be aggressive. Mm-hmm. Or do you figure out safer, easier ways of being aggressive? And he sort of had an unhappy medium.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I think he came out trying to be very safe.
Yeah, that I thought was a bad call. I thought that was just straight up a bad call.
Yeah, it was a bad call, and I think correcting from that bad call basically put him in a position where he had to try to fix too much over the rest of the fight to really ever get himself in a position to win it.
Yeah, I would still say, good call with the double jabs. That is a very safe way of sort of harnessing the Bobby Knuckles burst. where you can sort of charge forward off the fence without just putting yourself in danger. But where were the kicks off those jabs? That was one of the main things I really wanted to see. It was something he did have success with in the first fight. And, just like taking easy targets when you get Adesanya to bite on these threats, and actually like making the fight really competitive or forcing Adesanya to do something, that's something that will get you into a position where you can kind of do what you originally wanted. You can force Adesanya to step in and counter him, which on the few occasions when Adesanya tried to step in with punches, he ran into the best jabs of the entire fight. I know it was mostly just jabs, but the jab is a great, reliable counterpunch. And it was very effective whenever Adesanya did try to close into punching distance.
Yeah, because part of the thing I would say, too, is, on Adesanya's side, one of the things that he did really well in the first fight that we didn't see was he was able to crash Whittaker in the pocket, force big exchanges out of Whittaker, slide back, and counter him.
Yeah.
People talk about, like, oh, well, Adesanya's a counter fighter, and if somebody's not going to throw, what is he supposed to do?
Yeah.
That. The best counter fighters create their counters.
Absolutely.
They don't wait for their opponent to create them.
Absolutely. But we have, as with Whittaker being anxious against long guys, we have seen a lot of that from Adesanya lately.
Yeah.
People just either do bite on his feints, but not with aggression, not with offense, or they look past a lot of them and just try to stay defensive. And he doesn't seem very confident building off of that.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah, I mean, he running into the same couple of left hands all fight it's kind of a problem.
Yeah. A really confident striker should, like, even when you get hit, that should be a piece of information you can build off of. It shouldn't be, and the only lesson you take away from it should not be do less. Like, okay, I'm going to charge in and he's going to try to jab me. How do I bait that and punish him? How do I use that predictability against him? I thought arguably a more disappointingly passive fight from Adesanya. I think giving him the win is, upon review, probably the correct call, although I do still think many close rounds and I think it's very reasonable to say this is a 2-2 fight with a swing round. Although you may disagree, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, calling it live, I was thinking like a judge and thinking what I expected the judges to do.
Yeah.
And that was 4-1 Adesanya.
And it's just Adesanya being assertive and doing more. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, like, I wasn't also just sitting there being like, man, this is a toss-up. And anyone giving Whittaker rounds 2, 4, and 5 is not insane. It's not crazy to think that he won those 3 rounds.
Yeah.
I didn't score them for him live, but it's not crazy talk. And that's... So the other thing I wanted to hit on with my point about smart fighting and all that kind of stuff too, just as like a really reductive crux of the point, is that, part of it is that fighting is almost all sports are sports of offense exclusively. When you get right down to it, I mean, they all have points.
Defense is always its own reward. You got to score points.
Defense is always its own reward, except in the NFL where you can get a safety off of sacking the opponent in the end zone.
I was very disappointed to learn this week, by the way. I don't watch football or know anything about it. Very convoluted sport, rules-wise.
It is an incredibly simple sport that has so many complex rules layered on top of that most people trying to explain it to you will start with the complicated stuff, and by the time you get to the simple stuff, you're like, I don't care.
Yeah, can I just... I will let you finish your point, but I do want to say, so I don't know anything about football. I watched the Super Bowl with some friends and family, and apparently it's just the norm for people to run out the clock on their last play. And, I'm fine if that's in the rules, but to me, it should be an unspoken rule that you get shit from your own fans if you do that. But I guess it's just normal. People don't mind.
Incredibly normal.
So, like, the people I was watching with are like, oh, the Bengals lose their fourth down, and they're like, oh, that's the game. Like, what? There's 45 seconds on the clock. Couldn't something happen? Like, no. They can just pretend to be talking about a play, and no one's going to boo.
Nope.
You should at least be, it's fine if you do that, but that's called gamesmanship, not sportsmanship. You should get booed. You should feel a little embarrassed if you win like that, especially the Super Bowl.
But it's
sport. Bad sport.
It's incredibly common. It's the thing with football is that it is so many moving parts and so convoluted that really every attempt to do something is a high opportunity for chaos.
Sure.
Which is what makes it fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the game. Just a bit of a
run an actual play. You have like 5 people. The ball has to go from the center to the quarterback to a running back or to a receiver. That's 3 points of transfer for a ball on every play.
Yeah.
That it's gonna, anytime it gets bobbled a little, you can screw the whole thing up.
Yeah, I enjoyed the game, but it was like watching Howl's Moving Castle. Enchanting experience, and then it sort of ends on a wet fart.
Yeah, I feel you on that. So anyway, if defense is its own reward,
yes, please.
The idea of MMA is if you have 2 fights, and in one of them, one fighter lands 2 strikes over 15 minutes, and his opponent lands 1.
Mm-hmm.
And in another, one fighter lands 100, and his opponent lands 50. It's very clear to see what the better chance of winning is going to be.
Right.
It's going to be with the guy who landed 100 to his opponent's 50.
Absolutely.
And not the guy who landed 2 to his opponent's 1.
You're buying yourself some margin for error.
Exactly.
Because if it's low output, you better hope someone doesn't think, as I did for several of these rounds, that 1 strike was good enough to counterbalance the 2.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's 100 to 50, that very little chance of that happening.
Now, the very smart point that somebody made that is hard to fault, except that it undercuts the entire idea of the whole sport and of our enjoyment of it.
Did someone say it's not gay?
No, nobody's claiming that.
Okay, they're always wrong when they say that. It is gay.
Yeah, well, I still maintain it's not cool enough to be gay. Like, I know that there are gay losers out there, but in general, like, gay cool is way cooler than combat sports cool.
Like all of my listeners, for example.
Anyway,
what's the point that they made?
The point that they made is, well, he gets out of this. He's healthy. He didn't take any damage, and he walks away ready to fight again soon.
Sure.
And isn't that smart? And yeah, but then don't fight. Like, the smartest version of that is to just never put yourself in a situation to be punched at all.
Yeah, the smartest version of that argument is become an accountant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's fighting, like risk is inherent, and maybe the risk you should be taking is one where it's ensuring your chances of winning the fight, the thing you've already decided to do.
Yeah. If you don't want to fight, that's totally fine, and that's an incredibly intelligent point. That's why I clap for every fighter that actually retires from this sport.
Sure.
Like, great. You finally made the actual smart choice.
Uh-huh.
But if you're going to do this incredibly dumb thing, then the smart way to do it is not to do as little of it as possible.
Yeah, I'm with that.
It gives your chances of knocking somebody out are much greater on 100 strikes than on 2.
Yeah.
Your chances of hurting them badly enough that the judges can clearly see that you've done something to win are much higher on 100 than 2.
Yeah. At the end of the day, maybe the Just Bleed guys have a point.
Yeah, there's a
nuanced type
by offense.
There's a nuanced version of just bleed, which is like maybe winning for sure is worth a little risk.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with that. I think especially in fights where, as you said, I think the correct way that you evaluated the judge's eyes very accurately, how they would be seeing such a fight. If you're in that position, you should be expanding on that.
Mm-hmm.
You should be building to something, and hopefully a definitive win, even if you can't get the finish, some really clear rounds, of which, however you spin it, rounds 2 through 5 were none of them very clear.
No, they were all rounds where if I'm Whittaker, I'm panicking.
Sure.
And saying, my God, I might not be winning any of this.
Right.
And if I'm Adesanya, I'm thinking, I'm maybe not winning this fight. I probably am, but only probably maybe, and that's probably not, I shouldn't be banking on that.
Yeah. You shouldn't be, to go back to the Super Bowl, you shouldn't be trying to run out the clock all fourth quarter because you're 1 touchdown up.
Yeah.
Bad
it's like
idea.
a 6-3 Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
Score another, go for it. Make it certain.
Not only does nobody want to watch it, but your opponent gets within your 30-yard line, they can kick a field goal and tie the game.
Right.
And
at a certain point, you have to accept that you allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I still find it a compelling fight. I would never call it a great fight. More of a confirmation of what I knew about these guys than anything new learned. But it is what it is. My incredibly stupid idea, which everyone has perfectly justifiably shit on, is that Robert Whittaker should just go to light heavyweight and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see it just for a minute. Even if it's just for like one fight with Anthony Smith.
Yeah, which there's a lot of fights in that division that I looked at the rankings and I'm like, this is very tough for Robert Whittaker, actually.
Yeah, you get up there to the really big. I mean, because the thing with if we've talked about this before, but if heavyweight is decided on how tough you are and how hard you hit, light heavyweight is decided on how insanely athletic you are and how hard you hit. And
Whittaker's pretty insanely athletic, but not that hard hitting. And there's a lot of guys
not even that insanely. Like, he is a good athlete.
Sure.
But we are talking like dudes like, dude like Yuri Prochazka could literally be doing anything. Yeah,
probably. So I say give Whittaker an instant title shot because he can definitely beat Glover. That's just the Jacare fight again, essentially.
Yeah.
And then he can retire. Because I do not want to see him have to fight someone like Yuri Prochazka or Magomed Ankalaev or any of these guys that would make him supremely uncomfortable.
You know what my terrible hot take is coming out of all this? Ngannou versus Gane was a more interesting fight.
Whoa. Well, it had more pronounced swings of momentum, I guess.
It had the tension in that felt much more real to me because both men were obviously pushing themselves to their incredibly sloppy brink.
All right. Well, on that hot take, I am going to end the segment, quickly replace Zane with another guest co-host. In fact, can you put Molly in front of the mic? I want to hear Molly's thoughts on Tai Tuivasa versus Derek Lewis after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are continuing through the UFC 271 main card. Knowing Zane and I, what I'm about to say is a lie, but hopefully at a more brisk pace. None of these are worth, I think, particularly as much discussion as the main event. Mediocre as it may have been, given some of the potential, there's certainly a lot to take away and evaluate, and some nice conclusive thoughts to be drawn about both guys in that fight. Tai Tuivasa, Derek Lewis, not as complex. Let's put it that way.
Man hit hard.
Yes, man do hit hard. Both man hit hard, in fact.
Both man hit hard.
I flipped a coin and picked the Chris Daukaus last time on the idea that he would come forward and knock Derek Lewis out, and it didn't happen because he didn't do it correctly. I flipped the coin for the same reason on this one, and Tai Tuivasa did it even though he didn't necessarily do it all correctly.
Man not hit hard enough.
No,
I think is
unfortunately
lesson with Chris Daukaus.
Or maybe man not eat punch well enough is more to the point, because Tai Tuivasa, I will say, maybe not as clean a pressuring performance as I would have liked to see, but I think there are some genuine positives to take away from this for Tai Tuivasa, beyond just that, boy, can he take a punch, even though we've seen him finish before, and boy, can he punch hard in return. One thing I really want to highlight, he didn't actually get out-wrestled by Derek Lewis.
No, not terribly. He did get taken down a couple times, and he did get...
But he got back up.
He got back up.
That is
he
so...
did get nearly crushed by Derek Lewis the first off one of those takedowns, where like Lewis just started to not, and that's possibly an inflection point for Derek Lewis's evolution in his career, because I think what we saw out of the Daukaus fight is a lot like what we saw here, and what we saw here may have cost Derek Lewis a fight he would have won 3 years ago. Which is that, for a long time, what made Derek Lewis so much better was he became patient. Yeah, that was like the core evolution in Derek Lewis's game. Yeah, he just stopped doing stuff, and it worked great. And what we saw in the Daukaus fight, and I think what we saw a little of here, is a Lewis who is now being more assertive in a smarter way than ever. Like he created he created takedowns out of the clinch. He turned those takedowns into crushing shots that had Tuivasa badly hurt. And when Tuivasa gave him a little space, he just went and stepped forward and lit him up with a 1-2 that had him all kinds of rocked. Yeah. But probably one of the big reasons that Tai Tuivasa was able to get back up was Derek Lewis immediately went to trying to create offense.
Yeah, and I know it's not like this is a decision MMA fighters frequently have to make. Like, I'm going to stand up now and get blasted. Like that's a very common position. Guy has like a whizzer or like a waist cinch or something on you. You're against the fence. You just got to stand up knowing that his free hand is going to be hitting you in the face.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take, if there's a real lesson to be taken away from the main event, it's Israel Adesanya had exactly the right idea, just giving up his back and jumping to his feet at every opportunity. Yeah. And worked perfectly. And,
obviously riskier proposition at heavyweight, which probably, in addition to everyone being out of shape and slow and getting tired after 2 minutes, a reason why we don't see that gamble actually being made more often. But it arguably just won Tuivasa the fight. Yeah. If he hadn't forced a stand-up there and accepted that he was going to eat some shots and been okay with that, he probably would have just lost. Yeah. You don't want to give Derek Lewis a lot of time on top. Terrible. Easily the best part of his game. So a critical moment there from Tuivasa, and then in round 2, successfully defending the same takedown that worked on him the first time. So the man's not a great grappler, not a great wrestler, but I really thought that, like, just strategic thinking and awareness, that was a really genuinely good look for him.
Yeah, I think honestly what this fight showed out of Tuivasa, it was patience. It was the step forward. That one, and this is actually, he showed it against Sakai too. So this has happened in successive fights now. This may be the point where Tuivasa is hitting that Derek Lewis point.
Yeah. Where
he's just learned to calm down.
I think you're right. Yeah, just being a savvier kind of slugger.
Yeah, and like it is a world of difference for a heavyweight as powerful and tough as both of these men are when they hit that point. Like, it is a game changer in a way that it would not be in any normal, reasonable working division.
No, not at all. And you know, as much as I was screaming at Tuivasa to stop wrestling with Lewis, he actually, he did it in the right way. Mm-hmm. He was largely just clinching with him and wasn't wasting all of his energy trying to take Lewis down because he was terrified about being on the feet with him. He was clinch wrestling and clinch striking.
Yeah. And just slow him down, be patient, wait for your opportunities to come to you, and don't panic fight Derek Lewis.
Pretty much. And obviously the clinch strikes in particular were ultimately the deciding factor of the fight.
Yeah. I mean, Derek Lewis does not have a wealth of technical depth to offer anybody anywhere. No. So if you can, if Tuivasa could clinch him up and just be like, oh, I'm going to set up a couple clinch strikes here. Lewis didn't see him coming. He didn't have any idea.
Yeah. Smash him with some elbows. I like to see that. And obviously disappointing. Derek Lewis clearly took a dive, but hey, what can you say?
I mean, he did land face first, head first onto the canvas, if that's what you're talking about.
He took a literal dive.
He literally jumped in the pool.
Shallow into the pool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said on Twitter that Tai Tuivasa was, because obviously the real analysis that every smart viewer of MMA takes is that anyone that I'm rooting for who loses took a dive.
Yeah.
And because I was rooting for Tai Tuivasa, I was disappointed to see him trying his hardest to take a dive. And then unfortunately couldn't get there before Derek Lewis took a dive first. So what a shame. He nearly got it. But, I think, in a very heavyweight way, a lot of positives to take away from this from Tai Tuivasa. It was just, he traded punches with Lewis and somehow won. But it was also more than that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's a clear arc that we're seeing from the guy who lost to Sergey Spivak.
Yes.
To the guy who beat Augusto Sakai and Derek Lewis.
Yeah.
And I mean, even going back to the Greg Hardy fight, Tuivasa was not quite that guy.
No, and in this one too, though, just like in the Hardy fight, he did show that the man may not have great defense, although he does have some. He does he's got a bit of Mark Hunt where he will roll under shots and come back with his hooks. But he actually can counterpunch. So hurting Tai Tuivasa is not an easy win.
I think part of it too is just, heavyweights, they don't just age at the back end of their careers on a different scale.
Uh-huh.
I think they age on the front end of their careers at a different scale too.
How do you mean?
Tuivasa really does seem like he's 17.
Right.
Or 18. Mentality-wise, he is just, learning the steps of adulthood.
Yeah.
And...
he's 28. He's a goddamn baby.
Exactly. In heavyweight standards, he's a child.
Yeah.
And I think it really is just, even mentality-wise, it's just sort of he's just finally starting to kind of get self-control and understand. And maybe it's just because when you're that huge, nobody's ever going to teach you that, you got to check yourself.
Yeah. So, hey, lessons learned, well executed, even if in true heavyweight fashion, it was still a 50-50 mess most of the time at best. Some nice crucial decisions made by Tuivasa, and I agree, showing some genuine growth from prospecthood into now bona fide contendership at heavyweight.
Yeah, it's just too bad that none of the cool fights are likely to be there for him for the next year.
Why is that? You think they're going to do Ngannou again?
Well, I mean, Ngannou's knee is busted. And
sure.
He's not even under UFC contract right now. So
you could give Tuivasa like Volkov.
You could, yeah. Volkov's got a fight booked, but you know, Tuivasa, he could do Volkov or he could do Aspinall. If Aspinall wins that fight, it would be a hell of a rush for Aspinall. But you know,
well, they've already basically decided that Aspinall doesn't get to sit out.
Yeah, and
fighting Volkov is already quite a step up.
You can always, you know, if Rosenstruik beats Marcin Tybura, you know, you've got options out there to make other fights, but you basically have like Stipe Miocic out in this weird netherworld of not wanting to fight for anything less than a title, which I get. He's earned it.
Sure.
He likes being a firefighter, so the threat of like, oh, I might never fight again just doesn't seem important to him at all. And then you got, you know, this other specter of John Jones out there too, where it seems very likely that the UFC will make an interim title fight with John Jones and Stipe Miocic. And so Tai Tuivasa is just going to have to wait around. Maybe fight Cyril Gane. But that would also be it would be a hell of a risk to do with your most fun title contender. Yeah,
and there seems a significant chance that Gane just sort of dully beats a guy like Tuivasa.
Yeah. Even Derek Lewis's, rejuvenation or his growth of patience and assertiveness, neither of them got him within 5 miles of beating Cyril Gane.
Yeah, absolutely. In the same way that if he's now the new Derek Lewis wasn't going to beat Cyril Gane either.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it like Derek Lewis may be the best version of himself right now, honestly. And he was not anywhere close to fighting or winning the fight he took with Cyril Gane.
Yeah, absolutely not. Although now that I think of it, it would be really funny to see Tuivasa somehow go in and like out wrestle Gane. That would be very funny. So, all right. On to the centerpiece of the card, really, the people's main event. I was actually really interested in Cannonier Brunson.
Yeah.
It was a real, I don't know if necessarily a true outcome fight. It didn't actually, I said before that it did, but it didn't quite play out that way either, because I think it was far too easy to just completely discount Derek Brunson as a striker.
Yeah.
And even I said like, oh, Brunson's wrestling is the pivot point of this fight. Whether or not it works, that determines how it plays out. But Derek Brunson, he hits like a Mack truck.
He really does. He is incredibly awkward about it.
Yes.
But he is such a good wrestler that anybody who fights him, that's all they think about. So everything Derek Brunson does surprises everybody.
Yeah, and hitting super hard will get you far. And Derek Brunson has, and we saw it here, developed, at least until he gets tired, enough craft and experience as a striker to consistently surprise people on the counter, which he did. Yeah. He knocked Brunson down with a counterpunch at the end of the first round. Cannonier down with a counterpunch at the end of the first round, while also out wrestling him. It almost made me think that if Derek Brunson had just not gone so hard for the wrestling, he really would have had a great shot at winning this fight everywhere. A slower fight, because clearly the wrestling exhausted him.
Yeah, clearly the wrestling did exhaust him.
He went for how many takedowns in the first round? Let me find out real quick.
It was a lot.
Yeah. He attempted 9 takedowns in round 1 and then 4 in round 2.
Yeah.
And to Jared Cannonier's credit, only credited with getting 2. So I think we saw things out of both guys here. What we saw out of Cannonier is that it's not just being stronger. His takedown defense has genuinely improved a great deal. that really shouldn't be surprising because he's a John Crouch. He's an MMA lab fighter. It's something that I have credited MMA lab fighters with for a long time. They all have really great, like, dynamic defensive wrestling and grappling. They're just like super hard scramblers, even when they're not great wrestlers. Who's the guy who... There was a guy several years ago, he just kind of washed out of the UFC. But he always impressed me by he hit hard, he kind of had a glass jaw, but he was just really hard to, like, consistently out-wrestle. He was the kind of guy you could, like, get in on the takedowns again and again, but he would just fight them really, really hard. And I'll think of it in a minute.
But, yeah, it's too vague for me, unfortunately.
Yeah. I'll think of it in a minute. But that's the thing all the MMA lab fighters have. And I think Cannonier may be a bit, spotty in a lot of ways, but he's clearly getting better. He's getting more comfortable. And being a coachable fighter with a great coach who is clearly developing and at the same time being immensely powerful and athletic is a really dangerous combination. And I think this fight was a very good look for Jared Cannonier. Yeah.
I will say, like, I'm a little questionable on if Brunson hadn't pushed so hard, maybe he would have just won it striking, or like been able to put together a prolonged performance in which he did all of his wrestling and striking and, was able to break Cannonier down. And that I do really think part of why he was able to knock Cannonier down was how hard he was pushing the wrestling and making Cannonier have to think about it.
Sure, yeah.
If he was not pushing it that hard, it may have been much more likely that he just would have gotten caught.
Could be, yeah. At the very least, he was like, while always awkward, he was not just like falling off balance every time he had to evade a punch in the first round.
Yeah.
Round two, like he couldn't make a read without destroying his own position because he was dead tired.
If nothing else, it's clear Derek Brunson treated this as a true outcome fight.
Yes.
He thought, I either have to come out and wrestle this guy into the ground from moment one, or I am going to get knocked out. And he couldn't wrestle him into the ground. So he sealed his own fate that way.
Yeah, he really did. What else did you take away from this for Jared Cannonier? I think, actually, you know what? One thing I took away from it, I think I may have, just based on other, how good other middleweights are or how not good middleweights tend to not have a ton of breadth to their games because it's the journeyman division. Everyone's kind of really leans into one thing.
Yeah, it is an island of misfit toys.
Yes, and frequently they get really good at that one thing. But they'll have a lot of depth, but just not be able to fight well when taken outside their comfort zone. For Cannonier, or rather for Brunson, I think because of that, I actually said last week, great scrambler, Derek Brunson, really impressive mat wrestling. In this one, he didn't really seem to know what to do against a hard scrambler in Jared Cannonier.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot of really great scramblers at middleweight, so it's maybe easier to look like a great scrambler.
Right.
For Brunson. Also, though, I think Cannonier, he kind of... There's a bit of Derek Lewis in him where he just makes you really tired having to try to wrestle him.
Yeah.
I think for Brunson, it was... probably some panic, like, oh my god, this guy is really strong, and this is way harder than it normally is because this guy is so strong. I'm having to work way harder.
And that's where it benefits a guy like Cannonier to also be freakishly strong.
Yeah, the thing I also probably took away for Cannonier, unfortunately, is that I don't think he's going to be able to do a lot with Adesanya.
No. I
mean, I already knew that from the Whittaker fight, but this kind of just reinforces the idea that, like, if you give Cannonier a lot to handle, he gets lost.
Mm-hmm.
He can stay mentally strong. He can stay together. He can find himself, know what he's good at, come back, bounce back, and not get broken.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, the way he got knocked down by Derek Brunson is very much a guy who is just like, oh, my God, I'm so sick of all this wrestling. I got to come out here and try to make something happen.
Yeah.
And I got caught.
Yeah.
And I think, with Adesanya, if he fights a slow, his general slow-paced power striking bout, he's going to start getting a lot to handle, and he's going to open himself up for the similar problems.
Yep. Make a Whittaker 1 style mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Or a Brunson Adesanya style mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So, all right. Still, I think a very good look. I'm still, impressed every time with Cannonier, where he adds a little bit. He has an ability to adapt that I don't know if you would have expected based on how his early losses played out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to beat the whole, Derek Lewis idea to death, but it is, Cannonier has gone through that progression of he has found his calm,
mm-hmm.
and he is now in the later stages of his career finding his functional aggression within that calm.
Mm-hmm.
He has learned to take what his opponent is giving him and stay centered and stay focused. And he has learned that he needs to go out there and do enough to then actually go assert his fight on people.
Yeah. Still all too rare in MMA that we see someone that I would classify as an effective thinking fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And Cannonier is that. This fight, the Gastelum fight, I think we've seen multiple times now that he will go in there and effectively adjust.
Yeah, and he's, it's also partially, too, just the thing of so much of what heals all wounds in MMA truly is time, where it's just like, oh, well, how is this fighter going to evolve, or what are they going to learn, and how are they going to adjust their craft? And a lot of times it's like, well, they'll just kind of do what they do for a long enough that they actually just get better at it.
Yeah. Yeah,
they get more chill about it.
Yeah.
They get more adjusted. When they get more chill about it, they're able to be more relaxed and do things because they're not stressed.
Yeah. And you can just see all the stuff that Cannonier has always had, power,
mm-hmm.
great defensive jiu-jitsu. Those things are still there. It's just that they connect better now.
Yep.
He's still got the same great. His guard is really strong. Once again, it came through, but now it's just way more geared towards forcing scrambles and getting back to his feet.
Yeah, realizing that if he can force a scramble, he is so strong that the other person is very unlikely to control him in that scramble.
Yeah, I mean, I want to give him a lot of credit for just straight up beating Derek Brunson from the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Getting in knee shields, getting his butterfly hooks, elevating Brunson, creating enough room that he can hip heist and get back to his feet. Really assertive bottom grappling.
Mm-hmm.
So good stuff. Okay, let's take one more break then. When we come back, the last two fights on the main card here, Renato Moycano finally getting what feels like a meaningful win, and Alexander Hernandez, I think, really solidifying his role as a guy who, as Phil said last week, is just kind of, for now anyway, destined to be a can crusher.
Yeah.
And then Bobby
both
Green.
men, I think the emotional baggage for both men was on full display, and it just turns out that Hernandez is worse.
Yes. Yeah. And then Bobby Green, styling on Nasser Haqparast. Both of those after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Okay, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's, as promised, get into those next two fights. Zane, I will let you take the lead on Moycano Hernandez.
Yeah, I think this kind of, we were pretty split on this. I think you picked Moycano, I picked Hernandez.
Mm-hmm.
And I was worried. We were both worried about the damage that they bring into their fights from past fights. And I don't even mean like physically at this point. It's just all mental baggage, mental hang-ups and crutches. Moycano having been knocked out hard several times now. Mm-hmm. And Hernandez having really been pantsed by Donald Cerrone, and for a dude who very clearly for years banked on his pride and his macho-ness and his, nobody can handle me demeanor, having your pants pulled down and then like your butt spanked in front of a huge audience.
Yeah.
It really climbed inside Hernandez's head.
In more ways than one, this was the Cerrone fight again.
Yeah.
He had worked himself back to a point where he thought he could win that fight. And despite his best efforts, despite, I'm guessing, thinking that he had improved since then, he really lost the same fight.
Yeah, he really did. And the thing is, for Moycano, that impressed me a lot is that Moycano had his panic moment. Mm-hmm. Like, he went out there, and he didn't even reference it specifically, but you could, we picked up an interview he did shortly after the fight with one of the Brazilian media outlets, and he said, like, oh, I'm really unhappy with my first round. I got to a position I dominate. He got up. He was able to, like, get out of it and turn the fight around.
Yeah.
I need to do better with that.
Interesting.
And you could see that in the fight. And that is something that he has to overcome. He has to figure out, because he came out. He
came out really assertive.
Yeah, he came out really assertive. Looked great.
Yeah.
Was just firing on all cylinders.
Quicker, I feel like,
power.
Quicker with the counters with the hands than I think I've ever seen him. Mm-hmm. Just pulling the triggers, throwing combinations, aggressive counterpunching.
Yep. And then he took Hernandez down.
Which is in itself very impressive.
Yeah,
Hernandez
really impressive.
Tends to be, even against the likes of Cerrone, the wrestling tends to be one area of the fight where he pretty much always wins.
Yeah. And he had Hernandez in all kinds of trouble, and Hernandez was able to fight his way back to his feet and get back to range, which is impressive for Hernandez, but did not show. It was not the key of what has been a problem for Hernandez.
No, it's nothing.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah, and Moycano after that, especially hearing that, you can kind of identify, like, he's slower, he's more hesitant.
Yeah. The last 2 minutes of that round, last minute and a half,
yeah,
he was checked all the way out of it.
Yeah, I thought watching live, in fact, that he had somehow that quickly, what surprising for a lightweight it would have been, had exhausted himself, because he just looked so much slower. But then looking at round two, it's like, oh, he just, like, his confidence was shot for a couple minutes.
Yeah, he just has, he has this memory in him of, like, oh, this is when I start getting pieced up, and he did.
Yeah.
Like, Hernandez started just going after him and landing on him, and every time he landed, Moycano looked more defeated and shook up.
Yep.
And then they went back into their corners, and I don't know if he got a talking to or if he just refocused himself, if just surviving was enough. But it is impressive to me that Moycano then came out and had the exact same fire that he started round one with to start round two. And Hernandez, I don't even know if it was the overconfidence that brought him to the same place.
I think it's just that. I mean, I think, maybe a slightly different mechanism than in the Cerrone fight, but I just think he just has terrible defense.
Yeah,
like
he does.
His offense has gotten better on the feet. We've seen that. This is the first time where, after defending that takedown, you can see there's a lot more variety and thought in how he puts his strikes together. I particularly liked that he was using his jab and firing to the body off of it, mixing up his targets with the right hand. Yeah, just like really putting a lot of variety in his combinations when he's in the driver's seat, as against the people he's been smoking. You can see there's some really nice creativity in those combination attacks.
Yeah.
But if you evade the first layer and start countering, he crumbles.
Yeah. And the big thing with the thing I think, I say it may be an overconfidence issue as well as just, a lack of defensive training. But the thing that struck me in round 2, and I was, even as I was live tweeting, I was just like, what is going on with Hernandez here? Is that the success he had at the end of the first round, the moment Moycano stopped retreating and just stood his ground, Hernandez just full-on car crashed into him.
Yep.
To the point that he actually, I think, I thought it was maybe a clash of heads, but somebody else was like, oh, it was shoulder to head. Mm-hmm. But he just slammed his head into Renato Moycano.
Yeah, and that is what happened. That's why I say it was the Cerrone fight.
Yeah.
I really came into this, the reason I picked Moycano ultimately was, I was like, well, Hernandez can even lose a fight like the Thiago Moises one. So if he's more passively counterpunching, he can still kind of flummox Hernandez. It ended up being, again, like Cerrone, he just thought, I'm not going to back up. I'm going to slip. Yeah. And you're going to run into me, and then I'm going to chase you out of the pocket with counters. And, you're absolutely right. Hernandez just crashed into him and then doesn't know what to do to disengage safely.
No.
He can't.
No clue.
Protect his chin. He loses his stance. He just starts backpedaling. He turns away. Terrible, terrible defensive instincts.
Yeah.
And even if it was a clash of heads, he literally he ran away after that last clash.
Yeah. Because, he did it the exact same thing, 1 minute before it. So it's not just, he just crashed into Moycano full on, no defense in place to react. Nothing built to react to the idea that at this point Moycano might not give ground.
Yeah. And it's just I guess it's just wired in. His reaction is, oh, now I can safely reset, and his resets are terrible.
Yeah.
So if the guy doesn't let you reset, he just gets rocked.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that he's not lacking durability or anything. He just puts himself in an awful position to do anything when somebody starts putting their punches together and he's already stuck retreating.
Yeah. Really makes you wonder how he's going to rebound from this, because, this did feel like he had, it does feel like over the past few fights he's been trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
He's been passive when he's been worried about this kind of thing happening.
Yep.
And he's been aggressive when he thought that he had it fixed. Mm-hmm. And sometimes he's right and sometimes he's totally wrong. The choices he made against Drew Dober were not wildly different than the choices he made against Chris Gritzmacher.
No.
It's just one of them got him knocked out and the other one got him the knockout.
Right. It turns out one of those guys is better than the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need it's a wise thing that, it's a wise thing to advise fighters that, you can spend time getting better at the things you're good at. That's often a very good way to invest in your training, rather than trying to fight against type. But when it comes down to the granular aspects of just technique, you need to shore up your holes as well. Yeah. And when it's something as glaring as you can't retreat for even a second without being completely vulnerable to anyone who just walks you down, that's a major, major oversight. He's gotten better at the things he was good at. He's gotten more varied offense. But if you just don't let him do it, he doesn't know how to stop you from punishing him severely. Yeah.
The only solutions he's come up with so far to date are to just not fight.
Yeah. So he needs probably a camp change or something. He needs something to actually expand his skill set. He needs to work with some boxing coaches, some kickboxing coaches. Somebody who can teach him. Even if he just stood his ground after crashing into somebody, if he had a clinch to go to, if he had offensive wrestling, even if it's just avoid retreating, it would be a positive change. But, how about learn to exit the pocket on an angle?
You know what I've just realized?
Huh.
Man is really, without having the height of the same success heights that my comparison here had, unfortunately for him, he is really stuck in the Luke Rockhold zone.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, man, all of this power offense works so well when you have it all clicking. And then the moment people start to deconstruct your defense even a little bit, the gulf is so wide that it is practically unfixable.
Yeah, absolutely. Two fighters who really rely on their offense, and even that ends up looking a little more clever than it is just because they're both great physical specimens.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's either like, you get into a fight against someone who's a similarly unstructured athlete and it's a mess.
Yeah.
Or you just get picked apart by somebody who can survive and put you on the defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, on to the main card opener here. Bobby Green versus Nasrat Haqparast. I was a bit worried coming in because I was so confident picking Bobby Green.
Yeah.
But I was right.
Yeah.
You were right. Phil was right. All of us who confidently picked Bobby Green, this was the fight we expected. Even better, in fact. First round, fantastic. Second round, Haqparast sort of pushing in. I thought round 3, even as it started live, I was like, because I talked about this last week, I was like, we might see some of Bobby Green's offensive wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Dan Hooker, if Haqparast, when the chips are down, is going to try to make something happen. And there was a moment, Haqparast fired a kick, and Green caught it and ran him off his feet. And I was like, hey, now he's just going to take the third round and just neutralize any momentum shift. Instead, he completely fucking outclassed Haqparast in round 3 with some of the best boxing he's ever shown.
Yeah.
His corner was like, hey, you let that second round get close because you're measuring dicks with this dude. Let's go out there and counterpunch and move off of our punches and pick him apart like you can. And
have you looked at the stats for this fight?
Yes, he quadrupled him.
Yes.
In round 3, 79-21. That to me, I don't know if I've ever seen a round that I would confidently call a 10-8 when the fighter winning the 10-8 does it almost entirely off the back foot.
Yeah.
You don't see that in MMA.
I wish it was called more. I mean, I think that the judges who didn't score one of these that round in particular, a 10-8 round, are cowards. Like, that's a coward's 10-9.
A really clear 10-8, a completely dominant shellacking.
Yeah.
Mostly off the back foot.
Yeah.
It was dope.
It was great.
So fucking cool.
And, actually I knew right before the fight started, I knew that Haqparast was going to get his ass kicked even worse than we guessed.
Mm-hmm.
There was a key moment that was incredibly telling, and it was absolutely like oh my God, this guy is about to get shellacked. And that was when John Anik was doing his little we talked to these guys this week and this is what they said spiel as they were like walking out and getting in the cage and all that.
Right.
And he said, we talked to Haqparast about Bobby Green and his technical boxing and all that. And Haqparast said that he doesn't think that Green is even as technical as Mark Diakese. And I was like,
you're getting stopped.
This man is going to get absolutely crushed.
I actually didn't catch that. I heard Bobby Green mention it in the post-fight interview, though. He was
what
Bobby
did he
Green
say in the post-fight. Oh yeah,
or like at the press conference. He said he came in extremely pissed off because apparently Haqparast said they did the stare down and he saw fear in Bobby Green's eyes.
Yeah,
and Bobby Green was like, "I'm going to show you fear, motherfucker." going to show you what fear feels like. And then he also mentioned that he said he wasn't as good as Jacasey. I was like, that is maybe it's just talk, but my God.
It is
indefensible.
It is a incredible oversight of preparation.
Yeah.
Is what it is. Because you got to know what you're in for. You got to know what kind of fight to win. Bobby Green has lost plenty of fights.
Sure. There
are many ways to beat Bobby Green. But to go out and be like, oh, I'll just be slicker than this guy. He's not even as good as... No.
I can somehow effectively defend and counter this guy in the pocket. No, I'm not going to move my head. I'm just going to keep my guard up. That'll stop Bobby Green. He doesn't know how to straight punch down the middle. Yeah. And for much of the fight, I mean, Bobby Green was going to win it anyway.
Yeah.
He's durable enough to take the shots. We know Haqparast hits hard, but mostly in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely does it get into the back half of a fight, and he's still capable of hurting his opponent. Even guys that he wrecks in the first round, when they survive, they manage to take his shots much better later on.
Yeah, he's a 1s and 2s striker who relies on a really heavy speed edge.
Yeah,
and
you get his timing.
Is going to decrease over time, goes down, and then there's nothing to surprise anyone. Everybody knows what a 1-2 looks like.
Exactly. You get his timing, the speed starts to diminish, and then you can take the shots.
Yeah.
And so, Bobby Green was going to win anyway, doing what he mostly did in the first 2 rounds, which was just let Haqparast stand in front of him and outplay him with feints and tricky little combinations where you're just kind of squaring up a lot of the time and just poking him. And then when one shot lands, you just quickly fire in another one to take advantage of that momentary interruption. But the real beauty was in round 3 when he was finding those same initial moments and then doing much more creative things with it.
Yeah.
He was hitting him and then changing angles and then cracking Haqparast when he had to adjust to reface him. He was feinting and drawing shots out and countering them and then taking angles off those counters. He hit the body. I would have loved to see him do it even more, although Bobby Green is one of the few guys who consistently body jabs people in MMA. But he was doing it with hooks and stuff in round 3 and just styling on Nasrat Haqparast.
Yeah, when we talked earlier about the idea that a good counterpuncher creates their own counters.
Yes.
This is what that looks like.
Yes.
When we talk about the fighter who throws 2 strikes and the fighter who throws 100 strikes, and doubling your opponent is a lot more impressive when you throw 100 strikes than when you throw 2.
Yeah. How about quadrupling them?
Yeah. Bobby Green outlanding Nasrat Haqparast 188 to 76 is a much cleaner this is a much cleaner performance than Adesanya put on over our Whittaker. Now, obviously, Whittaker is a better fighter than Nasrat Haqparast, but the math still works in that general. That's still the general layout of the math you want to be doing.
Yeah. So
this is the epitome of a smart fight.
Yes, 100%. And again, I just want to emphasize to do that while rarely taking a forward step.
Yeah.
Is so goddamn cool. It's something that happens in boxing all the time.
Yeah.
It's in certain schools, that's the ideal fight to win, is one where you victory through evasion. You focus on not getting hit, and then you can really choose your spots to hit back. But you just don't see it in MMA. No one in this sport can box.
No. The sport doesn't.
It also doesn't lend itself to it.
To dissuade it.
Yeah, it doesn't lend itself to it as well, which is why there are a variety of ways to beat Bobby Green. There are people who have beaten him even when he's on the back foot, despite how good he is at doing it.
Yeah.
But
he's lost a lot of fights where he's massively outstruck his opponent, even.
Sure.
It's just...
Yeah.
And a lot of those were bad decisions, but it's nonetheless the sport, it doesn't have... There's a lot of emphasis placed on how well you can control be perceived to control what your opponent's doing.
Right.
And Green does not, the way he fights does not imprint a lot of control on the minds of the judges. But I think, he's finally getting to a point where it feels like he's popular enough.
Yeah.
That judges actually know what he's doing.
Yeah, and he also has the trick that the best defensive fighters in boxing have, which is to make the defense look fucking great.
Yeah.
Like there's a boxer right now. I actually haven't kept up with his last couple fights, but there's a guy named Tevin Farmer, who is he's got like a really goofy crossed eyes. And you look at this guy, you're like, that wouldn't be a defensive genius. He is. But his real trick is he sells the defense. So it ends
crossed
up
eyes, it can make anybody really defensive.
You're impressed when you can slip one punch. He sells the defense. He plays up the misses. He makes it look dramatic. It really gives the impression. And in boxing, this is in fact supposed to score more heavily, like ring generalship. There's no, I don't think there's any explicit hierarchy of the 4 scoring criteria in boxing. There's clean punching is one, ring generalship is another, effective aggression is another, and defense also scores in boxing.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to have. You don't need a progression in boxing because you're only doing one thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still of the opinion that, clean punches should be the only thing that technically score. Everything else is its own reward, and it serves the goal of letting you land better punches.
Yeah, that's also. I mean, that's based on a baseline of just scoring across all combat sports. That's really what it should always come down to.
You should be, beating the other guy by outscoring him.
Yeah.
But even so, even with the difference in criteria, Tevin Farmer makes the defense work. And even if it's an MMA fight and you're technically not supposed to be scoring it that highly, although it should come into play when, he was also just cleanly out punching Haqparast, so it shouldn't even be a factor.
Yeah.
But it does make it look like you're in control.
Yeah.
Which is something that Adesanya benefits from when he's walking someone down and posturing. And not really doing a lot, but it very much feels like he's in command.
It's the Ben Henderson trick.
Absolutely. And Bobby Green is a master of bullshit who also is just beating you. It's like the bullshit is essential now so that the judges don't miss the fact that he's beating them otherwise.
Yeah. It's just really wonderful to see it all click for him at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it has. There's probably been an evolution just in the past couple years in his, I think more than anything, his understanding that and I don't want to lay this quite at any one person's feet, but it may be that fighters like Max Holloway have shown fighters like Bobby Green that you can do more. There is Bobby Green was fighting guys 4 years ago, where he's outlanding, somebody like, I don't know, what's a good case for a classic Bobby Green loss? Trying to find just the right thing, but he's outlanding Drakkar Klose in 2018, 92-58.
Yeah. Boy, how did
and
he
he's
lose
turning
that
around.
fight?
He lost that fight.
How did he lose it? Is my question.
I know.
I have to rewatch that and figure that one out.
But he's turning around and he's going to the judges. The hell? How did I lose this fight? He's outlanded the fight after that. He outlanded Francisco Trinaldo 50-31.
Yeah.
He turns around and he's like, okay, he lost to Thiago Moises, outlanding Thiago Moises 85-42.
Outlanded Fizio, although that was largely in one round, so that one you got to understand.
But the thing that it seems like he's learning, especially at the point of this Fiziev fight, and maybe the Venata rematch was really where it started, is like the solution isn't to turn to the judges and be like, oh, do I have to fight a different fight to get you guys to score it for me? It's like, no, you can actually just throw a lot more.
Yeah.
Like, why not just throw insanely more?
Yeah.
You know?
Emphasize the success you're having. Build on it.
Yeah.
Convince them.
And I love to see it.
Yeah. It's
Seems like
arguably
it's
unfair,
great.
and I'm with Bobby Green being frustrated by many of his losses, but
Oh, yeah. No, I mean...
go out there and sell it.
Yeah.
Let the bullshit not just confuse the opponent, but back up the genuine success that you have honestly been having for years and years and years, just frequently cleanly outstriking people.
Yeah.
So what about Haqparast? I think it's very clear the man is stagnant. You know what was really funny to me? There was a Kelvin Gastelum tweet where he was like, it was like, wow, rough loss for Haqparast, but I know he'll be back better than ever. And I was like, is it technically projection if you're literally talking about your fucking doppelganger? That he's like, clearly Kelvin Gastelum is almost literally talking about himself.
Rough loss for Nathan Haqparast. I know he'll be back better than ever because it's actually me out there, and I am going to be back better than ever.
Yeah, obviously. So, but it is increasingly questionable whether Haqparast will ever be better than ever.
Yeah,
he's still young.
He's still only 26,
but the losses are piling up now, and this was. I know, like the Drew Dober one, he just got knocked out cold, but these last two were probably the most,
beatings.
Exactly, the most dispiriting, where he has just been roundly beaten for 3 rounds by clearly better fighters.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, definitely seems like the point where he,
there's got to be a change, he has to.
Yeah, there's got to be a change. Partially, like, is TriStar it anymore?
Right.
Who's the last fighter we saw really evolve out of TriStar? Not just get good to a point and then fight well.
Yeah.
But, like...
None? I mean, I think it's questionable even, like, how much someone like Rory McDonald evolved.
Yeah.
And he's the last clearly great TriStar fighter. And it's almost like, how good might Rory... You have to wonder at this point, how good might Rory McDonald have been if he hadn't been a TriStar fighter?
Yeah.
Like, he had so much potential, and TriStar made him, like, safe.
Mm-hmm.
But Rory...
TriStar's a very jacked... It is clear now that there's an era of MMA evolution that TriStar and Jackson Wink were firmly part of.
Yeah.
And might be kind of stuck in.
Yep.
Where it's just like, okay, well, what are these, camps like ATT and Syndicate and the Henry Hooft one that changes its name every 4 years after whatever scandal they have.
Sanford and Extreme Couture turning out a lot of good fighters these days.
These camps, they're all, they all seem to be pushing an evolution to something, current. They're all trying to evolve current games. Mm-hmm. And we see that from a lot of their fighters. We see fighters trying to, push their camps forward push their games forward to the current level. And yeah, with Jackson Wink and with TriStar, it just kind of feels more and more like
outmoded.
Yeah. I mean, Alpha Male's kind of there too, but even Alpha Male feels like they're trying to figure out new wrinkles with,
Yeah, I mean, at least their fighters are, like, consistently good at the one thing that will always be crucial for MMA, which is just being a really good scrambly wrestler.
Oh, I thought it was going to be tiny and buff.
But, like...
Yeah.
Investing more and more in, like, leg locks and shit. Like, the innovations that Faraz and team have been trying to make at TriStar just seem more like flights of fancy.
Yeah.
Than like, well, we know this works. It's always going to work.
Yeah.
At least alpha male has that. Get in the wrestling room and develop fantastic cardio and the ability to always, if not win, then survive a scramble. Very good base for this sport.
Yeah, it's true. So yeah, I don't know with Haqparast.
They also seem to encourage, or at least say nothing about to stop their fighters from working with other coaches.
Yeah, it's true.
A lot of guys at alpha male
they have to at this point. They've gotten to the realization that they can't actually have any real coaches at Team Alpha Male because Favor will always dick swing them out of the building.
Right. But that is, a lot of guys at Alpha Male do seem to now view that as like their home gym, yes, but really as like their wrestling camp.
Yeah.
And then pick up striking coaches from elsewhere and just kind of work with their own striking coach. And it's guys like Josh Emmett and Andre Feely, it's worked really well for them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we talked about this going in, that Haqparast may be in this spot where, like, there's a reason I worry about fighters who, he turned pro.
Yeah.
When he was 16.
Yeah.
And I don't like to see fighters turn pro when they're 18 or 19.
Yeah, and he hasn't had the young veteran type of career or game either.
Yeah.
He's the guy who turned pro young and was just had the right raw abilities.
He was a phenom.
And the confidence to crush people.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't out there like being beaten by these grown men and therefore spending the first 10 years of his career being safe. Those are the guys, Jorge Masvidal, Bobby Green, Sean Strickland. They spend so much time having to learn to survive that when they finally realize they can start whooping people's asses, they do it really late in their career.
Yeah. But for most people, like, I think MMA careers have gotten longer as guys are training better. They're not hard sparring as much. They're managing themselves and their nutrition and their weight cuts and all that better. It is just improved and evolved.
They're getting better steroids.
Yeah, better steroids. We're at a point where an MMA career now lasts more like 11, 12, 13 years for the average high-level fighter, rather than where we used to be like 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, hard limit of 10 years for almost everyone.
Yeah. But there's still, like, that's still a really good argument to turn pro when you're like 23 and not 16.
Yeah.
Because 12 years of 16 is 28.
Mm-hmm.
Haqparast is like, I expect he'll be a pro into his 30s.
Yeah.
But it may be just a plateau. The whole, like, the guy who got his ass beat by Daniel Hooker and who got his ass beat by Bobby Green might be losing those exact same kind of fights 5 years from now.
Yeah. And if it's just going to be a thing like where Hernandez is, where you take a step back and you can whoop somebody without improving, and then you never seem to build off of the losses that should be teaching you important lessons. It's been a plateau so far. So
yeah. And that happens to tons of fighters.
Of course.
Look at a guy like Joaquim Silva, Neto BJJ, who was like ripped to the gills, punches like a truck. You watch him out there, he can grapple, he can wrestle, and you're like, man, that dude's a freak. He is gonna be a contender at lightweight, and he fights once every 2 years, and now he's getting knocked out, and it's just never like, it's like, okay, well, you just never develop beyond the guy who was a great athlete who could do everything, but none of it that deep.
Yeah, at this point, even if it wasn't an increase in depth anywhere, I would welcome more breadth in Haqparast's game.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I would love to say, hey man, you've got some really great potential as a boxer. Develop that. Build up your defense, get better at counterpunching, learn to vary your combinations and your timing, learn to feint better. But even if it's just like Haqparast comes out in his next fight and suddenly he's trying to wrestle people in addition to the stuff he does, it will be a positive development. It will be.
He was not a bad wrestler early in his career.
No. He's used it to save his fucking bacon in a couple fights, but it's like all the adjustments Haqparast seems capable of making, for better or for worse, they only happen when he's like when things are going south.
Yeah.
He never comes in having just immediately pressing something new. It has to be forced out of him. So yeah, we'll see. Bobby Green's having his moment, and we love it. It's awesome. It's beautiful. Haqparast, starting to wonder if he will ever have his moment, but could have been worse to see a guy with potential flame out against somebody like Bobby Green, who seemed to have so much potential for so long and is like finally realizing it.
And hey, at least for Haqparast's part, like, he spent the last 5 years fighting in the UFC, making, $30,000, $50,000 a fight, and not $5,000, $7,000 a fight regionally. It's not big money. It's not life-changing money, but it's, he has
a professional MMA career.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. Again, there are a couple of prelim fights. We're going to fire off a quote-unquote quick bonus episode when we're done here. And just to let you know what you're in for if you do subscribe to the Patreon, or if you already are, we're going to discuss Kyler Phillips, his fight with Marcelo Rojo, and we're going to talk about Douglas De Silva, one of me and Zane's pet favorite fighters, and his incredibly thrilling and awesome and badass comeback win over Sergey Morozov. And who knows, maybe we'll mention a couple other things as well. I thought, Jacob Malkoun, that's middleweight's Bilal Muhammad now.
Yeah.
Really? And I actually thought that was a very impressive performance. My favorite kind of guy. He's not going to contend, but he might get into the fringes just by being really solid and having a broad skill set and knowing how to adjust. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about Carlos Olberg and him becoming capital T technical. Who knows? But those two fights, at the very least, those two bantamweight bangers, coming up on the Patreon. And otherwise, next week, I sincerely hope that Phil will be back and feeling better. And I guess we're going to have to talk about a card that is now headlined by Johnny Walker and Jamal Hill.
Maybe, who knows? Maybe the unthinkable will happen, and one of them will actually get a quick knockout, and you can talk about how that taught us absolutely nothing about them.
Oh well, on the
rather than talking about how watching them stare at each other for 25 minutes taught us absolutely nothing about them.
Well, on the bright side, next week's episode will also give us a chance to, fingers crossed, I know I'm cursing it even as I speak, to preview Dariush Makhachev. Really interesting.
Yeah.
And Tsarukian and Alvarez, also very interesting. And that's it. So until then, thank you, Zane, for filling in. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Molly. And thank you all for listening. Oh, by the way, find Zane on Twitter. He's at the Zane Simon. Follow me on Twitter. Mostly follow me, because Zane, I think, still has more followers than me. So at Boxing Bush, that's me. Check out the Patreon, $3 a month for all those bonus episodes. And until next week, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.